Rock and roll has always carried danger, but some tragedies hit so hard they still echo decades later. Imagine fame, fortune, and talent colliding with a single twist of fate, gone in seconds. These aren't just sad endings, they're shocking accidents that changed music forever. Which story will make you gasp the loudest? From planes that fell from the sky to cars spinning out of control, these are the fatal accidents that left fans stunned and the industry forever scarred. Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper, 1959. It was February 3, 1959, when rock and roll lost three rising stars in one chilling moment. Buddy Holly, just 22, had already reshaped music with Peggy Sue. Ritchie Valens, only 17, was skyrocketing with La Bamba, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson was riding his own wave of success. Exhausted from a grueling winter tour, they chose a small charter plane to escape freezing bus rides across the Midwest. Minutes after takeoff from Clear Lake, Iowa, the plane went down in a snowy cornfield. No survivors. Fans woke to headlines declaring it the day the music died, and the phrase would later be immortalized in Don McLean's anthem, American Pie. What makes this accident stand out is the cruel irony. Three young men, all in the early stages of careers destined for greatness, cut off before they could fully bloom. The crash didn't just devastate fans, it marked a turning point in rock. Safety for touring bands became a national concern, but the myth of rock and roll as a high-risk lifestyle only grew stronger. Even now, the thought of that frozen night feels like an eerie chapter that rewrote music history. Lynyrd Skynyrd, 1977. October 20th, 1977, was supposed to be another stop on Lynyrd Skynyrd's road to domination. Just 3 days after releasing their album Street Survivors, the band's chartered plane ran out of fuel and went down in the Mississippi woods. The crash killed lead singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, backup vocalist Cassie Gaines, and 3 crew members. Others survived, but with brutal injuries that haunted them for life. The tragedy felt like a cruel betrayal of timing. Street Survivors featured an album cover showing the band surrounded by flames, a chilling coincidence that was quickly withdrawn out of respect. Fans around the world were devastated. Lynyrd Skynyrd, with hits like Sweet Home Alabama and Free Bird, symbolized Southern rock's rise, but overnight, the band's future was shattered. Survivors like Gary Rossington carried on, but the spirit of Skynyrd would never be the same. For many, this accident became a harsh reminder that fame doesn't shield anyone from fate. When people talk about rock and roll curses, this crash is always at the top of the list. And let's be honest, every time you hear the slow build of Freebird, it's impossible not to think of how quickly everything ended. Stevie Ray Vaughan, 1990. By 1990, Stevie Ray Vaughan had become more than a guitar hero. He was proof that the blues could roar into the modern age. Known for his fiery performances and jaw-dropping solos, he seemed unstoppable. But on August 27th, after playing an all-star concert with Eric Clapton in Wisconsin, Vaughan boarded a helicopter to Chicago. Heavy fog blanketed the night. Moments after liftoff, the helicopter crashed into a hillside. All aboard were lost. Vaughan was only 35. The music world was stunned. Clapton later admitted he nearly boarded that same helicopter, a twist of fate that makes the story even more haunting. Vaughan's career had only just entered its golden period. He'd survived personal struggles, rebuilt his life, and was creating some of his best work. His passing left fans reeling, asking what masterpieces were still ahead that the world would never hear. Tributes poured in from every corner of the industry. To this day, Vaughan's guitar tone is studied, copied, and revered, but his sudden exit remains one of rock's cruelest blows. It's the kind of accident that makes you realize just how fragile the line between legend and memory really is. Jim Croce, 1973. Jim Croce wasn't your typical rock star. He was a storyteller with a voice that wrapped around songs like Time in a Bottle and Bad Bad Leroy Brown. Just as he was becoming a household name, tragedy struck. On September 20th, 1973, after finishing a concert in Louisiana, Croce boarded a small charter plane. Seconds after takeoff, the plane clipped a tree and went down, killing Croce and 5 others instantly. He was only 30 years old. The cruel part? Croce had written a letter to his wife that very day, saying he was ready to leave the road behind and focus on family. It arrived after his death. Fans were left grieving a man whose songs had just begun to climb the charts, with Time in a Bottle hitting #1 posthumously. Croce's accident showed that tragedy doesn't just end a career, it freezes it in perfection. Every song he left behind feels almost prophetic, filled with reflection and urgency. He never got the chance to grow old in the spotlight, but his music remains timeless, a bittersweet reminder of how a single accident can immortalize an artist in their prime. Otis Redding, 1967. Otis Redding's voice was pure fire and soul. At 26, he had already delivered classics like Try a Little Tenderness and had just recorded Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, a song destined to be his biggest hit. But on December 10th, 1967, while flying to a show in Madison, Wisconsin, Redding's small plane crashed into the icy waters of Lake Monona. Only 1 passenger survived. The accident sent shockwaves through the music industry. Redding's passing wasn't just a personal loss, it was the silencing of one of the greatest voices of his generation. Fans never got to see the full force of what he could become. Dock of the Bay went on to hit #1 after his death, making the tragedy even sharper. Redding had been on the verge of a breakthrough that would take him from soul icon to worldwide superstar. Instead, the accident left a permanent gap in music history. The idea that one of the most electrifying performers in history vanished in seconds is still hard to grasp. Every time that whistling outro of Dock of the Bay plays, it's impossible not to wonder what more he had to give. Patsy Cline, 1963. Patsy Cline wasn't just a country legend, she was one of the first crossover voices bridging country and pop with classics like Crazy and I Fall to Pieces. On March 5, 1963, after a benefit concert in Kansas City, she boarded a small plane bound for Nashville. The weather turned deadly. Heavy rain and fog blinded visibility. Near Camden, Tennessee, the plane went down, killing everyone on board. Patsy was just 30 years old. Her passing hit hard, not just in country, but across all of music. She had already broken barriers for female performers in a male-dominated industry. Friends like Loretta Lynn and Willie Nelson often spoke of how Cline had paved the way for them. The timing felt cruel. Her career was reaching a new peak, with audiences finally recognizing her unique power. What makes this accident unforgettable is the lasting echo. Every time you hear her haunting delivery of Crazy, it feels almost like a farewell frozen in time. Instead of decades more hits, fans were left with a voice that became eternal in its absence. Cline's death wasn't just an accident. It was a loss of potential that reshaped how audiences saw the fragility of fame. Mark Bolan, 1977. Mark Bolan, the glam rock frontman of T-Rex, lived as fast and flashy as his music. Known for hits like Bang a Gong, Get It On, he helped invent glam's glitter-soaked swagger. But on September 16, 1977, Bolan's life ended in a way that felt tragically rock and roll. His girlfriend was driving their Mini 1275 GT in London when the car struck a tree. Bolan, who ironically never learned to drive because he feared car crashes, was killed instantly. He was 29. The cruel irony made the headlines sting even more. Just weeks earlier, he'd staged a major comeback, even sharing a TV spotlight with David Bowie. His band T-Rex had defined the early 70s, and Bolan was finally gearing up for a new era. fans were robbed of what might have been a legendary second act. His accident became a symbol of glam's fleeting nature, bright, dazzling, and over too soon. Bowie himself mourned Bolan as a fallen comrade, recognizing how much the scene owed to him. Today, every time his riffs come blasting through the speakers, you can't help but imagine the bigger future that was waiting, cut off by the very fear he'd tried to avoid. Duane Allman, 1971. If rock had guitar royalty, Duane Allman was at the AOIA throne. As co-founder of the Allman Brothers Band, his slide guitar work on songs like Whipping Post and In Memory of Elizabeth Reed put Southern rock on the map. But on October 29, 1971, while riding his Harley-Davidson in Macon, Georgia, Duane swerved to avoid a truck, lost control, and crashed. He died later that day at just 24 years old. The loss was catastrophic for the band. They had just released at Fillmore East, now considered one of the greatest live albums in rock history. Duane's playing wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary, blending blues, rock, and jazz into a sound that set the stage for generations of guitarists. What makes this accident sting is how avoidable it felt. In a split second, one of rock's brightest lights was extinguished. His death was eerily echoed a year later by fellow bandmate Barry Oakley, who died in a nearly identical crash just blocks away. Duane's short career left an immortal mark. Every guitarist chasing soulful perfection is really chasing him. And maybe that's why fans still shake their heads, wondering how different rock might have sounded if Duane had lived past 24. Barry Oakley, 1972. If Duane Allman's accident was a tragedy, Barry Oakley's felt like a cruel rerun. Just 13 months after Duane's death, Oakley, the Allman Brothers bassist, was riding his motorcycle in Macon, Georgia. He collided with a city bus only 3 blocks from where Duane had crashed the year before. Oakley insisted he was fine and even refused medical treatment. Hours later, he collapsed and died from brain injuries. He was 24. Fans couldn't believe it. 2 core members of the same band, gone in nearly identical accidents within a year, on nearly the same street. It gave the Allman Brothers Band an almost cursed aura, one that followed them for decades. The heartbreak was doubled by what the band had been building. Oakley's bass lines were the backbone of classics like Midnight Rider, and his chemistry with Duane was legendary. Losing them both so close together ripped through the group's spirit. Oakley's accident turned Macon's streets into sacred ground for fans, a chilling reminder that greatness sometimes carries unshakable shadows. Rock has seen plenty of accidents, but few that felt so brutally scripted by fate. Eddie Cochran, 1960. Eddie Cochran was one of rock's earliest firebrands, packing rebellion into songs like Summertime Blues and Come On Everybody. He was the kind of artist who made parents nervous and teenagers feel alive. But at just 21 years old, on April 17, 1960, Cochran's career ended in a car crash while touring the UK. The taxi he was riding in blew a tire and slammed into a lamppost. Cochran was thrown from the vehicle and fatally injured. Gene Vincent, who was traveling with him, survived but was badly hurt. Cochran never made it home. His death shocked Britain, where he had built a massive following, and stunned the US, where his rebellious songs had already secured him a place in rock's DNA. What made the accident even harder was its timing. Rock and roll was still in its infancy, and Cochran was one of its most promising voices. Without him, the genre lost a spark that could have burned for decades. Today, when young rockers cover Summertime Blues, it's impossible not to imagine how Cochran himself might have evolved if he hadn't been taken in a split second. Cliff Burton, 1986. Metallica was on the rise, conquering the world with their thunderous sound. Cliff Burton, their bassist, was the band's secret weapon. His thunderous playing gave early Metallica a brutal edge. But on September 27, 1986, during a tour in Sweden, tragedy struck. The band's tour bus slid off an icy road and flipped. Burton was thrown through a window and killed instantly at just 24 years old. The accident gutted Metallica and its fans. Burton had already cemented his legacy with albums like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, which are now considered metal masterpieces. His classical influences and melodic approach made him a rare kind of bassist, one who could outshine guitarists. For fans, the cruelest detail was how arbitrary it felt. The band had drawn cards for bunk assignments that night. Burton picked the bunk that would place him directly in harm's way. Had the draw gone differently, history might have too. Metallica eventually pushed forward, but the shadow of Burton has never left them. Every fan who raises the horns at a Metallica show knows the legend of Cliff Burton, the genius cut short by a random twist of fate on a lonely Swedish road. Randy Rhoads, 1982. Randy Rhoads was a guitar prodigy who became Ozzy Osbourne's right-hand man, helping to launch his solo career with searing riffs on songs like Crazy Train. His neoclassical shredding style changed the face of metal forever. But on March 19, 1982, during a tour stop in Florida, Rhoads made a tragic choice. While others slept on the tour bus, he agreed to a quick plane ride with the tour's bus driver at the controls. The pilot recklessly buzzed the tour bus, and the plane clipped it before crashing into a nearby mansion. Randy was just 25. Fans were devastated. Rhoads wasn't just a flashy guitarist. He was disciplined, humble, and dedicated to pushing the boundaries of his craft. His accident felt needless, a moment of recklessness wiping out a once-in-a-generation talent. Ozzy himself was shattered, often describing Rhoads as like a brother. For the world of rock, his death was a reminder of how easily brilliance can vanish in a single dare. Every time Crazy Train blasts, it's not just a riff, it's a tribute to a guitarist who should have had decades more to shape music history. Rick Nelson, 1985. Rick Nelson was America's golden boy turned rock star, a teen idol who transitioned from TV fame into hit songs like Travelin' Man. But on New Year's Eve 1985, tragedy struck. While en route to a concert in Dallas, his band's plane caught fire mid-air and crash-landed in Texas. Nelson, along with 6 others, didn't survive. He was only 45. The cause of the fire has been debated for years. Mechanical failure, onboard heaters, even rumors. But what mattered most was the sudden loss of an entertainer who had been part of the cultural fabric since the 50s. Nelson's death was especially haunting because he had just staged a career revival with new music and tours. Fans who grew up watching him on The Adventures of Ozzy and Harriet felt like they'd lost a lifelong friend. His accident stands as one of rock's most shocking mid-career endings, a reminder that no matter how comfortable fame may look, tragedy can strike at 30,000 feet without warning. Jim Reeves, 1964. Jim Reeves, nicknamed Gentleman Jim, was one of the smoothest voices in the Nashville sound. His ballads like He'll Have to Go crossed country into pop charts. But on July 31, 1964, Reeves piloted his private plane through a thunderstorm near Nashville. Radio contact was lost, and when search crews finally found the wreckage, Reeves and his business partner were gone. He was just 40. Reeves's accident felt particularly cruel because he was one of the few country stars to command global appeal. He was adored not only in the U.S., but also in Europe and Africa. His passing cut off a career that was still on the rise internationally. Fans remembered him for his calm presence, his tuxedo style, and his unforgettable voice. Losing Reeves in such a sudden, violent accident left an aching gap in country and early rock history. His legacy has endured for decades, but every time his smooth baritone fills the air, it's impossible not to imagine the longer journey that should have been. Aaliyah, 2001. Though best remembered as an R&B star, Aaliyah's influence stretched across pop and rock crossovers, collaborating with Nine Inch Nails producers and reshaping early 2000s music culture. On August 25, 2001, after filming a music video in the Bahamas, her small plane crashed shortly after takeoff. Investigations later revealed the aircraft was overloaded with equipment and luggage. Aaliyah and 8 others perished. She was only 22. Her accident stunned a new generation of fans. Aaliyah was on the cusp of becoming a global superstar, with Hollywood roles and crossover projects lined up. The accident robbed music of a multi-talented performer who blurred genres effortlessly. Though younger than many on this list, her story fits the rock and roll narrative: ambition, momentum, and brilliance all undone in a moment of poor judgment and bad luck. Today, she remains a cultural touchstone, often cited by artists who saw her as proof that you could be bold, versatile, and unique. Her accident isn't just remembered as the loss of a singer. It's remembered as a brutal reminder that talent alone doesn't protect against fate. Reba McEntire's Band, 1991. In 1991, Reba McEntire was already a household name, but behind her powerhouse voice stood a band that gave her music its driving force. After a private show in San Diego, her team split across 2 charter planes for the next stop. Reba decided to stay behind that night, a decision that would change her life forever. One of the planes crashed into a mountain minutes after takeoff, killing all 10 people on board, including her trusted musicians and tour manager. The shock was immediate and crushing. Reba later described it as the darkest season of her career, struggling to cope with the sudden loss of people she saw as family. These weren't just backing players. They were the heartbeat of her live shows, seasoned professionals respected throughout the industry. This tragedy was different from the single-star accidents that often dominate headlines. In one terrible moment, an entire unit of talent was erased, a reminder of how dangerous constant travel could be for working musicians. Though Reba eventually found the strength to move forward, she has never stopped honoring their memory. More than 3 decades later, fans still remember the crash as one of the most devastating losses in modern music. A brutal reminder that sometimes it's not just the star who is stolen, but the very soul of the sound behind them. Skid Row's Rob Affuso Crew, 1990. At the height of glam metal's reign, Skid Row was one of the loudest voices of the era, with hits like 18 and Life blasting out of every radio. But in 1990, during a grueling tour, the band's crew bus was involved in a horrific highway accident. The crash killed several members of their road team and left others injured, shaking the entire Skid Row family to its core. Though the band members themselves weren't on that bus, the tragedy underscored just how dangerous constant travel was in the rock world. Road crews might not have been household names, but they were the ones keeping the show alive night after night. Losing them wasn't just heartbreaking. It was like losing the engine that kept the machine moving. For Skid Row, the accident became a brutal wake-up call. They were young, wild, and seemingly untouchable. But this loss reminded them that no one in rock is truly safe from fate on the road. Fans often forget that behind every screaming guitar solo and sold-out concert is a small army making it all possible. And sometimes, those unsung heroes pay the ultimate price. Allen Collins' car crash, 1986. Allen Collins, guitarist for Lynyrd Skynyrd, already carried the scars of the band's 1977 plane crash. But tragedy found him again. On January 29, 1986, Collins lost control of his car in Jacksonville, Florida. The crash killed his girlfriend instantly, and Collins himself was left paralyzed from the waist down. The accident ended his career as a guitarist, leaving him confined to a wheelchair. Collins joined the Rossington Collins Band and later appeared with Lynyrd Skynyrd reunions, but he could no longer play. His accident became a grim bookend to a life already marked by one of rock's worst disasters. What makes Collins's crash so haunting is the sense of déjà vu, lightning striking twice in the same circle of musicians. Lynyrd Skynyrd had already paid one of the heaviest prices in rock history, yet tragedy kept circling back. Colin's accident reminds fans that survival doesn't always mean escape. Sometimes it means carrying an unshakable weight until the very end. Tommy Dorsey choking accident, 1956. While best known as a swing band leader, Tommy Dorsey's influence carried into early rock and roll. His orchestra trained young performers who helped shape the new sound. But his death in 1956 was sudden and bizarre. After taking a sleeping pill, Dorsey accidentally choked in his sleep and never woke up. He was 51. Unlike fiery crashes and shocking explosions, this accident was quieter but no less devastating. Dorsey had been preparing to revitalize his career and was still a towering figure in American music. His sudden passing left a gap in the transition between big band swing and the new wave of rock. Fans were stunned not just by his death, but by how ordinary it seemed compared to the larger-than-life persona he carried on stage. In a world of guitar riffs and screaming fans, Dorsey's accident was a reminder that danger doesn't always look dramatic. It can come in the silence of a single night. Keith Relf electrocution accident, 1976. Keith Relf, vocalist and harmonica player for the Yardbirds, was part of the group that launched the careers of guitar gods like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. But Relf's own story ended tragically at home. In May 1976, he was practicing guitar when faulty wiring caused him to be fatally electrocuted. He was only 33. The accident shocked fans who saw Relf as a survivor of the chaotic 60s rock scene. While his bandmates went on to superstardom, Relf was quietly crafting new music. His death was sudden, avoidable, and cruelly mundane, proof that the dangers musicians face aren't always on stage or on tour buses, but sometimes in the simplest settings. What makes Relf's story hit hard is the sense of lost possibility. His later projects hinted at fresh creativity, but we'll never know where they might have led. In a world of loud crashes, his passing was a silent accident that still echoes across rock history. Mia Zapata street attack, 1993. The 90s grunge scene was filled with voices that burned bright and fast. Among them was Mia Zapata, lead singer of the Gits, a band that was gaining serious underground traction. In July 1993, after leaving a friend's apartment in Seattle, Zapata was brutally attacked and killed while walking home. She was 27. The accident ripped through the Seattle music community. Zapata's voice carried raw power and emotion, and her band was on the cusp of breaking nationally. Her passing became a rallying cry for safety in the music community, with benefit concerts held in her honor. Unlike plane crashes or car wrecks, this was a street-level tragedy, sudden, violent, and deeply personal. Fans and fellow musicians mourned not just the loss of a singer, but the silencing of a woman who had something important to say, in a scene dominated by male voices. Zapata's accident left a scar on grunge, reminding everyone how fragile life could be, even in a city filled with promise. Sam Cooke shooting, 1964. Sam Cooke wasn't just the king of soul, he was a bridge between gospel, pop, and rock, reshaping the entire landscape of popular music. With classics like You Send Me and A Change Is Gonna Come, Cooke had proven himself more than a singer. He was a cultural force with the power to define an era. But in December 1964, his life ended in a shocking accident at a Los Angeles motel. The circumstances remain tangled in confusion. Conflicting reports, unanswered questions, and strange details left fans reeling. Cooke was only 33 at the height of his career, with ambitious plans that stretched far into the future. His smooth voice, magnetic stage presence, and uncanny ability to write timeless songs had already made him a legend. What made his passing even harder to accept was the sense of unfinished greatness. He had just begun to push his music into deeper, more daring territory, signaling a future filled with possibilities. Instead, his story ended abruptly, leaving behind a legacy wrapped in mystery. Even now, every time A Change Is Gonna Come plays, it feels less like a song and more like a promise frozen in time, an artist taken just as his brightest chapter was about to begin. Michael Hutchence, 1997. Michael Hutchence wasn't just a singer, he was the heartbeat of INXS. With his untamed charisma and electrifying stage presence, he turned songs like Need You Tonight and Never Tear Us Apart into global anthems. By the late 80s and early 90s, Hutchence had become one of rock's most magnetic frontmen, adored by millions across the world. But in November 1997, everything came crashing down when he was found dead in his Sydney hotel room. He was only 37. The shock was immediate and surreal. How could a man so full of energy, leading one of the biggest bands of the era, vanish overnight? Fans and fellow musicians alike struggled to process the sudden loss, and the unclear circumstances surrounding his passing only deepened the grief. For INXS, the blow was devastating. Though they attempted to carry on, Hutchence's absence was a shadow they could never escape. His voice, his style, his presence, these were irreplaceable. For many, his death became a dividing line in rock history. The end of an era not just for the band, but for Australian rock as a whole. Even now, every replay of Never Tear Us Apart feels bittersweet, a reminder of a performer who lived brightly but left far too soon. Jeff Buckley, 1997. Jeff Buckley was the son of folk singer Tim Buckley, but he carved his own legend with the haunting album Grace. Songs like Hallelujah showcased a voice that critics called otherworldly. But on May 29, 1997, while in Memphis working on new material, Buckley waded into the Wolf River Harbor for a swim. Caught in the wake of a passing boat, he was pulled under and drowned. He was 30. The accident was devastating because Buckley wasn't reckless. He was just enjoying a quiet night. Friends nearby assumed he'd resurface, but he never did. His body was found days later. Buckley's death became one of the most haunting tragedies in rock. He had been on the verge of finishing his sophomore album, work that fans believe could have cemented him as one of the greatest voices of his generation. Instead, he became another artist frozen in potential, his brilliance preserved in a single record and endless what-ifs. Paul Kossoff, 1976. Paul Kossoff, guitarist for Free, gave the world the immortal riff of All Right Now. Known for his fiery playing, he was part of the British blues rock wave that reshaped the 70s. But on March 19, 1976, while flying from Los Angeles to New York, Kossoff suffered sudden heart failure mid-flight. He was only 25. Passengers described the moment as surreal, one of rock's great guitarists gone in the middle of an ordinary commercial flight. Kossoff's death stunned fans, not only because of his youth, but because he had been making moves toward rebuilding his career after personal struggles. The accident left fans wondering what more could have come from a guitarist with such passion and touch. Today, every time All Right Now hits the radio, listeners can't help but think of Kossoff's untimely passing in the skies, his career grounded forever in that moment. Shannon Hoon, 1995. Shannon Hoon, lead singer of Blind Melon, captured the spirit of the 90s with the hit No Rain. With his distinctive voice and poetic lyrics, he was poised for a long career. But on October 21, 1995, while the band was touring New Orleans, Hoon was found dead on the tour bus after a night of exhaustion and collapse. He was only 28. Fans were heartbroken. Blind Melon had carved out a unique niche in alternative rock, and Hoon's presence was irreplaceable. His accident was a crushing reminder of how quickly rising stars could fall. What makes Hoon's passing especially haunting is how fresh his career still was. Blind Melon had barely scratched the surface of their potential. The band never recovered the same spark, and fans were left with a permanent what if. Every time No Rain plays, it's not just nostalgia. It's a reminder of an artist whose voice was silenced just as it was beginning to soar. Rock and roll has never been safe, and these accidents prove it. From planes falling from the sky to split-second crashes, fate has stolen legends before their time. But the music they left behind still pulses with life, reminding us that even in tragedy, art survives. Which of these stories shocked you most? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe for more deep dives, and remember, in rock, the line between glory and disaster is razor thin.